Okay, when I was a kid growing up, remember my dad always kind of having these funny stories or exaggerations, and much like I do with people that I mess around with and make jokes with, he kept a straight face a lot of times. So I would never know when he's joking. And I remember as a kid, sometimes he would forget to say, "Hey, I was just joking," and just let the joke kind of just ride for a long time. So I remember one time he was eating, and it was something I haven't seen before. And I said, "Dad, what are you eating? What is that?" And he said, "Oh, this is rattlesnake." And I said, "Come on, rattlesnake? You don't eat rattlesnake." He said, "Yeah, it's rattlesnake." I said, "What do you mean it's rattlesnake? How do you cook it?" He said, "No, you just put it on the stove and you just cook it. It's rattlesnake." And I was like, "Oh," and so for the longest time I thought it was rattlesnake until I saw somebody else eat it, and I said, "Oh, you eat rattlesnake too?" And they said, "What are you talking about? This is corned beef hash." My dad always did that, spoke with jokes and hyperbole. Welcome to the Rodney Hill Podcast. Check me out at rodneyhspeaks.com. Well, welcome to the Rodney Hill Cast. And if you don't know me, read about me in my bio. I have a link in the description and everything else. And so, I'm doing a series and I want to return to it, the building blocks for life. And each of these building blocks for life kind of build off each other. And these blocks are useful for a full and productive life. And so today I want to talk about knowledge, about just knowing something and knowing what's true, knowing what's right. Because knowledge is very important in our society. And have you ever heard somebody say, "Well, what do you know?" or anything like that? What are they really saying? What they're really saying is, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. And so when you talk about knowledge, in this day and age of media and social media and the internet, it's under my opinion that knowledge is not easy to come by. I mean, when you think about the media, there's a lot of scams, a lot of false reports. Sometimes we take it for granted. We think if it's on IG, if it's on Twitter, if there's a tweet about it, TMZ, even though TMZ, I must admit, most of the time I think they do a pretty good job of nailing it. But a lot of times, people don't want to verify things first. They hear it and they run with it. They see it, they read it on Facebook, they read it on Instagram, they read it on Twitter, and they just run with it. I mean, the thing about checking, it's in the past. Checking to make sure that the story is true and correct, because a lot of people just want to be the first to report, the first to beat everybody else to the punch, right? I mean, if you look at our school system, what do they do? Memorizing, right? It's a bunch of memorizing to take the test, right? What happened to creativity or something like that? I think about the time back in college. Okay, in college, my major was communication with a focus on digital media and our multimedia, I should say. And so we had a test. So we had a digital media class, and during that class, the professor, he said, "We're going to take a test, and it's going to be on a computer, and so it's going to be multiple choice." I think he called it multiple guess. So it's multiple choice. And so there's a way to prepare. Again, we're in college. We've learned how to prepare for tests. And so there's a way to prepare for multiple choice tests that's different than other kinds of tests, because you can kind of know a little bit about the subject or the item, and kind of, you know, when you have the answers, the four answers there, you can kind of, whittle out the answers that don't pertain and get a pretty good guess on what the answer is. Well, much to our surprise, we go in the exam room and the test has some multiple choice, but a lot of essay. Now, that's a different way to prepare for a test when you have to talk about it and know it thoroughly. And so after the test was over, A lot of us were complaining and griping and complaining, even during the test. You hear some moans and grumbles. So next class, the class let the professor have it. How could you? You said it was multiple choice. There's essay questions on there. And the professor said, yeah, when I was preparing the tests on the computer system, I realized that the format I could use essay questions as well. And so after probably about 15, 20 minutes of taking the tests, a couple of things stood out. First, that the class was upset because we prepared differently, and the professor made a point to say you need to know the subject, which I agree with, I do. But we said we've been taking classes all our lives. One student said this. We've been taking classes all our lives, and we've been kind of trained to memorize and prepare for the test. And so when you say it's multiple choice, there's a way we prepared for it. And the professor agreed. How could he not? But the whole thing about knowledge in the school system there is that is it challenging us now? Are we learning what we need to learn, or are we just memorizing things? As they take out the arts from the schools, music and other things, creativity and the way we think starts to disappear as well. I mean, academics are good, but music, drama, art are also very good forms of expression and also very good for the brain and for knowledge. Are we learning the right information? What are they teaching us as far as academics? Talk show hosts, almost all of them nowadays have these segments where they go out in the street, they go out to people, and they ask them these questions, usually about history or something, or about the country or about the government. And it's amazing because a lot of people have no idea. And I'm talking about America. A lot of people have no idea, right? How does that happen? And so, where does this leave us, right? I think we will soon be a misinformed society that reacts a lot with just emotion. Emotion's good, but when we react with just emotion, it becomes a bad thing, right? I mean, think about the way the news is packaged nowadays. When you come, especially in California, I live in California, and every winter we have commercials that come on to prepare us for the news, if you're still watching commercials. But anyway, you hear about this storm watch, right? Storm watch, be prepared for the storm. And then it comes and it's a regular rain, right? It's the way to get our emotion to get ready. We got to watch the news because we got to find out about the storm coming up and prepare. Do we need sandbags? Or you hear about you're in danger. This project is killing people. Don't buy this. There's a recall. And it's, yeah, something that is at this one supermarket, this off brand, that there was a few items that came out that you need to return, right? The anthrax and Ebola scares, right? Real stuff, real dangerous stuff. But in the big scheme of things, the danger and the hype that was spread out caused a frenzy that probably didn't need to be there. I mean, the news learned that fear is a good way for you to stick around, right? They played on your emotion. One person, a sportscaster, said, and it's very true, you can't be neutral when you say and do stuff, right? The news can't be neutral, even political news. You can't be neutral because most people have a side and you want to feed into their emotion and to what side they're on. That's why I think me and my wife has a good balance because I react very little, and she probably is on the opposite side of the spectrum, so we balance each other out in that. Even sensitive stuff, police brutality, athletes that are guilty of something like domestic violence or anything else, we kind of jump the gun and we hear something and we react. Swift judgment. What happened? They did this, and that's all the person was doing? Yeah, let's go after him. Let's go. We need to do something, right? We don't sit back, take the time to get the knowledge, get the facts, gather information, and see what's going on. Now, politics, I don't know if I want to start about politics. The way I feel about politics, I hate the political system. I really do. With a passion. I just think we need to get rid of the party system. I think a lot of people right now, it's like sports teams. You kind of hunker in on your political party and your favorite political party. And I think we just need to throw out the party system so that people can think for themselves. That you need to decide and listen to what that person is standing for. And they'll still be labeled for a long time. I mean, there's a long way to go. But I think that's a step in the right direction. I remember back studying about Abraham Lincoln, and during his political debates back then, he said and they would go somewhere, they would all meet, the whole town would go, they would sit and listen to these guys, probably break for lunch and dinner, but all day long. Think about that, all day long, to learn where this person stood and all the decisions they would make, and where they stand as far as the issues are concerned. And Lincoln said, there isn't enough time for me to convey everything all day long. And there isn't enough time, Abe Lincoln said. And now we're doing everything in sound bites and little clips and picking apart what they say on both sides. Right? Colleges nowadays, it's a business. Student debt is going to be a huge issue in the future. I got student debt from student loans. It's a way to get your education. I mean, but the first time we went to school, the first time we went to college, this is going to date me a little bit. It was about $1,000 or less a semester. A semester. A lot of guys are asking right now, how old are you? But tuition seems to be going up and the quality seems to be going down. And I'm not a guy that says don't go to college. I'm just saying make a wise decision. It's also not for everybody. Don't go if you know you're not going to be serious and you're going to waste your money, especially if you're taking student loan. I've seen so many people take student debt because they're going to this college because that's what they thought they should do. And they go to these colleges out of state, and they go to these colleges that are specialized colleges, and end up spending 3 or 4 years there, getting 40 or 50 grand in debt and saying, this isn't for me. So don't do that. Now, certain professionals like lawyers and doctors, of course, need the education, need to go to schools. It's going to cost a lot of money. But other than that, be smart. Think. Decide if it's for you or not. So then we look. You say, Rodney, how do we get true knowledge? I say don't take anything at face value. Fact check everything. I get on people's nerves, especially probably my wife, because statistics, I dismiss them all. I hear a statistic and I say, yeah, prove it. That doesn't sound right. Because you hear something, every minute 200 kids die in the world, You know how many kids would die? I mean, that's just an example. That's not a real, I just made that up, right? It's for shock value. It gets you to be shocked. Also, I think it's to kind of get you in the mindset to where you're like, oh man, well, statistics say I'm not going to graduate. Statistics say this. And you kind of buy into it and give up. So don't take anything at face value. Question everything. Fact check. When I teach, and I do some teaching a lot of times in churches, I use the Bible to back things up. And if you don't believe in God, just another object. I think everybody does. I think if you don't believe in God, then you're angry at him. That's a different podcast for a different day. But, when you think theologically, because these whole building blocks I do take from biblical principles, even though this isn't a biblical podcast, I do touch on them a little bit. But, knowledge is knowing spiritual things because spirit is truth. And so that's the whole thing about knowledge, is getting to the truth and knowing what the truth is. That's why I say don't take anything at face value and fact check. Learn how to think. Don't let the emotion take over, right? Strive for wisdom, which is knowing how to apply knowledge. And so with that, I want to say be sure to listen to the other building blocks that I have discussed: perseverance, self-control, goodness. Those are the 3 that I have. And this knowledge will add on to that. And I'll be doing more, right? And so I'll be doing love to cap off the series. But if you have any comments, I encourage you to leave them. I encourage you to continue the discussion as I talk about these podcasts and have these podcasts up. And with that, this is Rodney O with the Rodney O Podcast. Go out there and obtain knowledge, everybody. Talk to you in the next one.